Hi boys and girls, this video is on calculating profit. To review, you start with your revenue or your income, how much money you make or earn selling an item. Now, you have to subtract out your expenses. How much did it cost you to buy those supplies in the first place? That cost comes out of your pocket. So in order to calculate your profit, you have to subtract the amount of your expenses, and the amount of money left over is your actual profit. How much money do you actually have? What is that extra amount? We're going to look at 4 examples today. As we calculate profit, we're going to be thinking about our formula. First problem. Patty had $110.28 in revenue from selling bracelets and $75.52 in expenses. What was her profit? So my question, we are trying to solve her profit. Now, I have some numbers. Let's figure out which part is which. So the first part says $110.28 in revenue. That is how much she made. Before she could make that, she had to go buy some supplies. Those supplies cost her money. So her costs were $75.52. That's kind of a lot. So let's do our math. So to calculate profit, we subtract the amount of her costs, how much money did she spend, from the amount she made. So let's do that math. Okay, now I can take 2 from 8, that is 6, but I cannot take 5 from 2. I need to regroup, but I can't take 5 from 0. I cannot take 7 from 1, so I'm going to start over here. Take 1 away from 1, that leaves me with 0, and that becomes an 11. Take 1 away from 11, that becomes a 10, and that becomes a 10. Take 1 away from 10, that becomes a 9, and that becomes a 12. 12 minus 5 is 7. Drop that decimal. 9 minus 5 is 4, and 10 minus 7 is 3. So altogether, Patty's profit from selling bracelets is $34.76. That is her actual profit. Okay? Let's look at another example. Okay, next problem. Peter's income from making and selling a table was $200. So I already know his income, it's $200. So I'm going to plug in his $200 into our formula. Now he has a cost. He bought some supplies to make the table, probably wood, maybe some paint. His costs to make it was $54.18. What was Peter's profit? So this is our question. So again, I'm going to subtract the amount of his costs from his revenue, and the extra money is his actual profit. How much extra money did he actually make? So let's come over here and do the math. So I'm going to take my 200 and turn that into a decimal form, subtract out 54.18, lining up those decimals. And obviously, we're going to have to regroup from here. Take 1 away from 2, that leaves us with 1, and that becomes a 10. 1 away from 10, that becomes a 9, and that becomes a 10. 1 away from 10, that becomes a 9, and that becomes a 10. 1 away from 10, that becomes a 9, and that becomes a 10. Now, I can see that that's a 10. Some of your teachers like you to cross that out and rewrite 10 up at the top, and so whatever works for you. Let's do the math. 10 minus 8 is 2. 9 minus 1 is 8. Drop down that decimal. 9 minus 4 is 5. 9 minus 5 is 4. And bring down that 1. Now, he sold it for $200, but after taking into account the money that he spent in the first place, this is the actual amount of money that he actually made. and that is called his profit. That's a pretty good profit for only spending $54. That's about almost tripled his amount. That's pretty good. Okay, now we're going to look at two more problems. These two are going to get into more of a multi-step situation, but if we continue to use our formula here, I'm going to go ahead and erase that, then we should have no problem. Let's get started. Next problem. Randa sold fancy pens at school. Randa's expenses were $11.55 for supplies. I already know her expense, her cost. It cost her some money before she could even make it. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that number in. She sold 14 pens for $2 each. What was Randa's profit? So our question is about profit. That means I've got to figure out her income. Well, it doesn't tell me exactly what her income was, but it gives me some clues. She sold 14 pens for $2 each. So that's 14 pens at $2 each. That's multiply. So 14 times 2, that's 28. We had to do an extra little step there in calculating her income. Now again, let's plug in our formula so we subtract out the amount of her costs. So let's come over here and do the math. So $28, again, I'm going to turn that into decimal form because my $11.55 is in decimal form. Okay, I cannot take 5 from 0. I cannot take 5 from 0, but I can take 1 from 8, and there's going to be plenty left. So I'm going to regroup from here, take 1 away from 8, that leaves me with 7, and that becomes a 10. Take 1 away from 10, that becomes a 9, and that becomes a 10. Now, Miss Moore, I can leave that there. That does not bother me. But again, some of your teachers like you to rewrite that as a 10 up there. So let's do the math. 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 5 is 4. Drop down that decimal. 7 minus 1 is 6. And 2 minus 1 is 1. So this is the actual extra money she has after paying herself back for her expenses. So Randa's profit for making and selling fancy pens at school is $16.45. Okay, we're gonna look at one more problem. As we look at this one more problem, we're going to get into some different language as well as multi-step. So notice I'm leaving my formula up there. Okay, let's look at our last problem. Brian bought a new chair. He repaired it and painted it to look like new. Then he sold it. Below is a list to show what he did. Price paid for old chair, $5. Cost to repair the chair, $4.25. Cost to paint the chair, $3.99. Selling price, $50. What was Brian's profit from selling the chair? So my question is about profit. That's my question. I'm going to put a question mark right there. And let's try to figure out the other two parts. So let's look for our income. What was his revenue? How much money did he make selling this chair? So I've got some numbers. Let's look and see what our revenue is. Price paid for a chair. Now, if you're paying for a chair, that means you're buying a chair. That's not your income when you buy it. When you buy it, you're selling, you're giving your money. Cost to repair. So when you repair a chair, that's not your income. When you paint a chair, that's not your income. Selling price, $50. So here I see when he sold it for $50. That is his income. He sold it, $50. Now, his expenses, I've got some other numbers here. So before he could fix this chair up, he had some expenses. The first thing he did was pay for it. He had to buy it. So $5 is part of his expenses. He repaired it for $4.25 and he painted it for $3.99. So we have some expenses, but I need to know my total expense. So I'm going to add these up. 9 plus 5, that's 14. I can make a 10 here. 9 and 1 is 10. 10 and 2 is 12. So I'm going to regroup that. Drop down that decimal. 5 and 4 is 9 and 1 is 10. So there's 10. 10 and 3 is 13. So altogether, his expenses were $13.24. Now to calculate his profit, we have to subtract that. So let's do the math. $50, again, turning that into a decimal, minus $13.24. So obviously I have to regroup from here. Take 1 away from 5, that leaves me with 4, and that becomes a 10. 1 away from 10, that becomes a 9, and that becomes a 10. 1 away from 10, that becomes a 9, and that becomes a 10. 10 minus 4 is 6. 9 minus 2 is 7. Drop that decimal. 9 minus 3 is 6. And 4 minus 1 is 3. That's a pretty good profit. So even though he resold his chair for $50, that's not his actual money he made, because remember, he had to spend some money first. So after paying himself back for his supplies, his remaining amount was $36.76. That's a pretty good profit for a $5 chair. That's almost 7 times as much as he spent just buying it. That's a pretty good job. All right, boys and girls, I hope you understood how to calculate profit using our formula. Revenue and income minus the cost of your supplies or your expenses. What is left is your profit. All right, thank you for watching.